record. Can you start recording?
Done. I'll give you a few minutes.
All right. For all of you who are tuning in here, I just want to check to see if you can hear me. So if you can hear me, everyone who is watching at this point, please drop me a 1 in the comments. Okay, bringing up these wonderful slides. Thank you, Danielle. All right. So we did start a little bit late. It's very possible that with the technical difficulties, not everyone is aware that we started. So at any point, we might as well just get started on this process. Okay, so my name is Mike Thomas, and I am formerly called the Everyday Consciousness Coach. Often people didn't understand what that meant. So I've changed my title to the Movement and Healing Coach to give people more of a clear idea of what it is that I do. And I'll be talking about attachment theory, not as a behavioral theory, but as a regulation theory. And I will be joined by the incredible, lovely, intelligent Danielle Ivins-Fishman. She is a trauma and attachment informed relationship coach. And she's going to be assisting me with her lovely slideshow and chiming in on the conversation here. Let me just check in and see if anyone has shown up on the live here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on the process of what we wanted to talk about. So the main reason I came on here is because I've written a number of posts on the attachment community. Some of you may be viewing this on my personal page. This live is intended for those on the attachment community Facebook page, where we discuss the concept of attachment theory as it applies to regulating the nervous system and how it plays out in our relationships, among other things. So in that particular post that inspired this live, there was some discussion around how to earn secure attachment and what's the deal with some of these symptoms that show up, these experiences, these states in our nervous system that show up that might not be as expected as we might think based on our attachment style. So shortly, I'm going to break down what the different attachment styles are. So if you're not familiar with that, I will be getting to that. But the long and the short of it is we develop in a very particular way that sets the tone for how we perceive the world and how we behave, specifically in our relationships, but also in other ways as well. So how are attachment behaviors, which as I said before, I'll be getting into shortly, how are those attachment behaviors related to nervous system activity? In other words, what's going on underneath the surface? When we see behaviors, what's going on in the nervous system? And as you'll find, as we start discussing more and more of what's going on underneath the surface, as we unpack it, that it's not always what it appears. Often, attachment behaviors are very different from what's going on underneath. They are adaptations to help us survive at their core. And they show up as behaviors, but what is it that we're feeling? And are we actually in touch with all of what we're feeling? And that's a big part of nervous system regulation as it applies to attachment theory. We need to be able to connect to what's going on under the surface, not only that we can feel, but that's going on regardless that we cannot feel, that can be measured as physiological activity, such as our heart rate going up or down. We might be, a term for that is dissociated, out of touch, not aware of the fact that our internal physiological states are changing. And so what I hope to achieve with this dialogue, this conversation, and some of the concepts that I'd like to share, the charts that are coming up, I'd like to achieve creating a greater clarity around what's the most effective way to heal attachment wounding so that we can gain what's called earned secure attachment, where our nervous systems are more effectively regulated. And how can we start to recognize what to do based on where we are versus what might be going on under the surface of what the appearances seem to show us. So Danielle, would you like to chime in here on the beginning of the conversation here? I wanted to discuss about how attachment styles fit onto the nervous system branches.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to be a part of this. You know, as we always do, we love to geek out on this stuff. So you've presented a lot of great information. We're going to structure this and bring this into the community. And I'm just setting up some of the slideshows. So I know the one thing that you really wanted to start to dig into is how to bring in our understanding of attachment styles with how our nervous system is reacting. And so just starting with some of those basic questions, I'll pull up the slideshow in a second, just beginning to have you flesh out how our attachment behaviors, whether we consider ourselves anxious or avoidant or fearful avoidant or disorganized, wherever we are, wherever we feel we most fit in that system, and how that relates to how we're behaving, how we're acting, how we're reacting. So just starting there, I'm going to bring up the slideshow, and I just think that this is a great way to just hash all of this out. So I'm going to bring that up now and have you begin. So let's pop this up. There we go. So let's start where I know you wanted to start, which is, hold on, just starting to describe the styles and also the polyvagal curve. So get started there. Let's see where we can begin.
Okay, great. So you'll notice here on this chart that the different attachment styles, for those of you who are familiar with it, are labeled on this what's called polyvagal curve. And polyvagal stands for the multiple poly branches of the vagus nerve, and how that innervates, that is, controls our autonomic nervous system, the parts of our nervous system that happen by themselves without us having to do anything, without us having to consciously adjust. So if you look at this chart right here, you can see that I've put the attachment styles into the different parts of the nervous system, and there's a combination one there at the top. This is a generalized a chart to show where these attachment styles tend to draw their activity from in terms of what part of the nervous system is going on. And it also shows the level of stress that's going on in each one of those nervous systems, whether we can feel it or not. So in the bottom there, you see secure, which is in a lot of ways put on a pedestal, but that's just a specific adaptation that basically describes how human beings are designed to function. We're designed to connect with one another. We're designed to regulate our nervous systems based on unconsciously, that is, our autonomic nervous system reads the body language cues of those around us, and it allows us to regulate our nervous systems. We see someone smiling, we tend to smile back. If someone's frowning, we have a sense that, okay, there's a concern here. Maybe they're angry. Maybe there's something I can do. Maybe there's a boundary that's been violated. So secure attachment functioning is how we're designed. And these other attachment styles are basically adaptations for early on in development when we don't have our basic attachment needs met, we adapt. And so these other attachment styles are adaptive. They allow us to survive based on the conditions we have. And so when you have a non-secure attachment style, that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It means that you have very specific adaptations that allowed you to survive in infancy, and they're playing out in adulthood. So as we move up the stress curve, anxious, otherwise known as anxious preoccupied, or ambivalent is another term. It's higher up on the stress curve. So that's that purple zone right there. And that happens in development based on not consistently getting our attachment needs met. So there's some sort of inconsistency going on, and it's much more elaborate than I'm going to summarize here, but those are the basics of why we would end up developing an anxious adaptation. And then if we have a lack of attachment needs, They're not, some of them are just not being met at all. We go into the highest level of stress response, which you can see in the green zone, avoidant. It is immobilized, immobilization. And that can not only be an immobilization in the nervous system around movement, but if it's an adaptation that we take throughout life, obviously we couldn't stay completely immobilized. But what else happens in immobilization zone is a dissociation, a lack of awareness, which is an adaptation so that we don't have to feel the discomfort of not connecting to our attachment caregiver, our attachment figure when we're infants. All of this happens before we're old enough to develop conscious memory recall. So this is not something we're aware of. And I want to make that very clear, that you can think you're one attachment style and you might be another. And there are ways of unpacking that and discussing, discovering what's actually going on underneath the surface. What are the cues to look for? So I understand what my attachment style is and how I can navigate that most effectively. And as you see over there in the yellow zone, also known as the PTSD cycle, post-traumatic stress disorder, that doesn't mean that you have classic PTSD. It means that there was a fearful situation in your attachment development period, that is during infancy, which resulted in a disorganization. All of the other attachment styles are organized. That is, avoidant takes distance, creates distance from people because it's too painful on an unconscious level. Too much nervous system stress arises, and so on. So can we go back to that first slide? In disorganization, there is a lack of organization that the other ones show. So in secure attachment, it organizes properly. We function how we should, and we stay regulated in our nervous systems. In anxious, we specifically organize around protest behavior, reaching. We get more mobilized, more loud, I guess you could say, more vocal and anxious. And avoidant is distancing and trying to keep from feeling that pain on an unconscious level. Disorganized is lacking the capacity to organize it because both of those parts of the brain that do opposite things are actually in conflict. Do we go toward our parental caregiver or do we go away from them? If there's fear, they're in conflict. We need them to regulate our nervous systems. We go toward them. But another part of us has to go away from them so we can get away from the threat. So this is a really important part of that process to understand what's going on in attachment styles, because if we know what's going on under the surface, we can start to go, okay, so how does that behavior show up as an adult? Because behavior as an infant is not going to translate into adult behavior in the same way. We have language, we're more sophisticated. Do you have any thoughts on that process as we, just unpack the basics of attachment there?
Yeah, no, I do. I apologize. My microphone just went off, so I just had to reboot it up. No, I think that the one part that I really appreciated that you said, because I've been on this journey for a while, and when I started out, I labeled myself one way, and then I got into some trauma healing, and then I felt like I fell into the category of more fearful avoidance or disorganized, that we definitely do, we go up and down the curve. And I think, and also very different parts of our life, intimate relationships can elicit different aspects of our attachment reactions and our nervous system reactions, different times of our life. If stress is really high, which I know we'll go into in a little bit, so we get to know ourselves in different ways. I think it's a humbling process. And I think it's also interesting that we will label ourselves one style, but you know what? It's really interesting if we ask our partners or the people that are closest to us, how do they feel we are? I mean, how do they notice we are? And so it just being open to all of that is all I wanted to add. So thank you for asking, and also for processing that little glitch in my audio. So now we're back. So yeah, so I think that's a great place to start. We can jump into the next part, which is just building on what we're talking about here.
I appreciate you bringing that to life, Danielle, in your personal experience. I have personal experience to share. It's a different mode for me. I'm in teaching mode. So I'll bring in my personal experiences if anyone has any questions about it. But as of right now, I'd like to draw attention to the different layers of our nervous system. And one way that it can be conceived of is what's called the triune brain. That is breaking it down into 3 different levels of complexity in terms of how it functions, how conscious it is, how unconscious it is. So at the outer layer, the cerebral cortex, otherwise known as the neocortex, this is the primate level. This is the level at which we think. This is the level at which we remember things consciously. This is the level at which we move in a way where we can learn skills. If you're going to learn to ride a bike, you need to learn to balance. You need to learn to steer. You need to learn to pedal. You need to put a lot of attention, conscious attention on that process. And all of these different parts of the neocortex are communicating with each other in order to coordinate learning this new skill of riding a bike. Now, once that becomes automatic, we pass that on to a more automatic part of our nervous system, of our brain. And so, as I mentioned earlier, primate level, that is, we share with primates, human beings do, we have a part of our brain just below that that we share with mammals. So in that way, we have a mammalian level, otherwise known as the limbic brain, in which we feel emotions, where we make meaning, where we remember things like memory of something traumatic or something wonderful or something we have to remember for school. It gets encoded in this little part of the brain within the mammalian limbic level called the hippocampus. And if it's particularly intense, positive or negative, it uses this other structure within the limbic brain called the amygdala, which is sort of a red flag, like, oh, this is really intense. Remember this. But it's not necessarily as conscious. And so attachment also happens at the mammalian level. So although we talk about secure attachment functioning as the goal in a lot of ways in terms of regulating our nervous systems, secure attachment functioning, or all attachment functioning for that matter, is actually a less conscious process that mostly operates through body language.
Right.
I think that's an important distinction to make. A secure functioning person isn't necessarily enlightened. They are regulated. They are more capable of using their higher functions, because when the lower layers of our brain are too active and they're impulsively moving and getting us to react to things quickly so we can survive, it overwhelms the cortex level, the primate level, the part that has us think. So the more stressed we are, the more trauma we're holding in our bodies and in our neurology, the less capable we are of what we would consider human functions operating on a regular basis. So often, the most traumatized people are the most stuck in their less than human parts of their brain function. It's not that they don't have access to them. It's just that their human qualities of empathy, compassion, forethought, planning ahead, I guess that would be included in forethought, creativity. These are all human characteristics that are less available if we have stress at the lower levels. So going all the way down to the reptilian level, that is the level we share with reptiles, the brainstem, and you can also include the cerebellum in that, although cerebellum, I believe, is also included in part of the limbic brain, and it also interacts with the neocortex. I won't bore you with the details, but the reptilian level controls our autonomic functions. That is, are we stressed or are we regulated? And there is an entire conversation to be had around what specifically happens in our stress response in the body and at that autonomic level of the reptilian brain that is designed to keep us safe. So to break down how this fits into attachment in a quick summary, we need to feel safe in order to be securely functioning. That is, our reptilian level of the brain needs to perceive no threat so that we can attach properly at the mammalian level. That helps regulate our nervous systems and keep them functioning in a regulated way. So we can regulate our emotions, and we can be, we can be capable of feeling more and adjusting to circumstances that are present. And we can use our neocortex to be more human, more empathetic, compassionate, creative, and problem solve, and all of those things that are involved in that process. So the reason why this is called hand model of the brain is because you can actually use your hand to take a look at how the cortex and the lower levels of the mammalian and limbic brain function. I don't see myself on screen. Can they see me?
I can. It's recording with you on there, but let's see. I don't know if you can see yourself. I can.
Okay. Well,
I don't know.
You can see me, then great. Okay. So is this the right side to do it, or should I do it on this side? Is there anything in the way of my hand?
Let's do this. How about we just
all right.
focus on you here? Perfect.
So in this handy model of the brain, taken from Dr. Daniel Siegel, who is a pioneer of interpersonal neurobiology. I'll get into that in another live, I'm sure, sometime soon. He talks about using the hand model of the brain to better understand what's going on in our nervous system, in our bodies, in our emotions, and our thoughts. So the wrist corresponds to the spinal cord. And up beyond the wrist, you have the palm area, which corresponds to that reptilian brainstem area. So that's about evolution, in evolution terms, as far as how long ago these structures evolved, about 300 million years old, reptiles. And then you go up to the mammalian brain. If I had a mutated second thumb, it would be more even, but this represents the mammalian limbic level that we just discussed. And that's about 200 million years old. So not quite as old as the brainstem in terms of how long it's been around. And when we say something's been around a long time, yes, it may be simpler in function, but it's also very adaptive and very powerful because it lasted that long. It was able to survive through natural selection. And so the longer something's been around, the more influence it tends to have over the newer structures. So when we're not safe, our mammalian brain is not working as well as it could, and same with our cortex, which goes over top. And if you'll notice, these two middle fingernails, which represent the medial prefrontal cortex, are very close to both the limbic and the reptilian brain. And they serve to integrate all of those functions together. So that's the basic gist of what's going on when you look at the layers of the brain that you can keep for yourself in your own handy model here. You can also use it to sort of represent what's going on when you're stressed. Too much autonomic nervous system stress going on. That is unconsciously detecting a threat that we don't necessarily know consciously is happening. Guess what? The result is likely to flip our lids. That represents not having access to our human functions in the cortex. So I would say that it's fairly accurate to generalize insecure attachment functioning whenever we're triggered, that we've sort of flipped our lids and we're not as rational, we're not as conscious, we're not as creative or empathetic, we're not as capable of feeling into others and allowing others to help us and feel into our experience, and so on. And disorganized, you might represent as even disconnected here, because attachment isn't even organized and connected to the whole. And so that's even less adaptive. And so a lot of challenges happen in fearful avoidance, disorganization, right? Avoidant and anxious here, and secure is more representative of a fully integrated, regulated brain. The opportunity to be more human is there. It's not necessarily there. As Jamie Wheel, the cultural anthropologist, said on a podcast I listened to with Danielle recently, oxytocin that's present when we're bonded and we're regulated, in secure attachment, for example, is considered the bonding hormone. But it's also very tribal. That is, we protect our own. So it's also, and this is where I'm quoting Jamie Wheel, he said it's also the curb stomp your neighbor hormone. So it's not necessarily making you a nice, compassionate person. It means you're well regulated, and within your own system, you are connected with your attachment figures, and you're connected as a team, and it helps your nervous system regulate. So it's a starting point. Secure attachment is not enlightened, it's regulated.
So what you're saying, and this is great, because I think what this allows us to do is step into compassion for ourselves, others, so we listen to this information, we're absorbing it in, we're, applying it to ourselves, applying it to our partners, applying it to our kids, applying it to those troublesome relationships. And it's just, for me, I'll even say this to myself or clients, it's like, okay, what brain am I in right now? All right, you know what, if I can feel, and I've gotten to the place where I can feel when my brain is not integrated. So it's almost like, am I in my human brain? Am I in my cortex? Am I in my monkey brain? Or am I in a disorganized state where I'm very, very well, I would say in collapse, or there's just no connection. And then that's where we start to bring in our tools, which we'll talk about. But I think it's just a really great place to say, okay, why is this helpful? First, applying it to ourselves and responsibility for our own, behaviors, and just protecting ourselves and caring for ourselves. So those of us that are anxious, have anxious tendencies, how do we just wrap our arms around ourselves and reach out for our secure network? And then just applying it the way we do. So I really appreciate that we can start to, again, hash this out, to get clear about it, and to start applying it, because this is so important. I mean, this is our way to unity consciousness, and we're such a long ways away. But thank you for going into that. So what brain am I in? And right now I'm in an integrated brain, but if I'm in, a moment with my mom or my partner, it's like, so it's the first step. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Quick check-in. If I'm saying this correctly, Rafaela, Pandy, thank you so much for joining us. Rita Moldovanos, and they're just checking in and saying, oh my God, just saw this and I can watch from the beginning, love all the charts. Yes, letting us know that they can see us, nothing in the way. So thank you for joining in, everyone.
And we'll put the slideshow on. I mean, I'm a big organized slideshow person. This is a bit simplistic, but we'll put it all on there along with a bunch of resources, just because I think we're all on a journey and we'll be able to connect with whatever resources are meeting us where we're at. So just meeting us all where we're at with love and compassion and a lot of just lightness, because this is a lifelong journey we're all on. And I really, really appreciate being a part of a community that is all in this together. And so, yeah. So, okay, so where are we going next? Let me just open up our slides. Anything else you want to say about that, Mike, as far as the triune brain and anything?
We're what, third slide in, and we're a half hour into our presentation. So
we'll go a little quicker. We'll go a little quicker, but there's so much to do.
Yeah, indeed. I tend to go really deep into concepts, so I'll try and keep it more brief so we can open up for questions for anyone who's there who wants to ask them. So I wanted to go into breaking down, unpacking a little of what's going on in the nervous system, starting with the threat arousal cycle or system. And that is, whenever we perceive danger, we start in social engagement. If you look at the chart there, where we're able to read each other's body language and perceive safety. Okay, so that's secure attachment functioning happening right there, which can happen between people who are not securely attached. So understand that you can actually regulate one another and learn to behave in a way that's called earned secure attachment. So we can go into this threat response unconsciously, recognize it, and bring ourselves back. So it's really important to understand that you can earn secure attachment whether you are securely attached or not. That not only is there hope, but there's plenty of science showing that this indeed is possible and happens on a regular basis. It connects with the concept of neuroplasticity, that we're able to adapt to our situation and we're able to rewire our brains based on our behavior and patterns that we repeat over and over again. So that being said, when we are pulled out of social engagement, that is, we detect a threat, our nervous system starts to go up in arousal. So if you're conscious of this, it might feel like a warming of the skin. You might feel your heart fluttering because it's starting to increase in speed. You might
flush up the face. I mean, that's how I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You can start to lose your salivation, get dry mouth. You can start to hold your breath. And so we're orienting to the environment. So a simple way of showing orienting is we just check out what's going on in the room. So if you're watching this, you might want to look around the room if you haven't done so already, and just notice what is around you. What are in your surroundings? And knowing what's around you gives you more of a sense of safety. So that's part of the body naturally going into a space. If you hear a noise behind you, somebody drops a book, quickly look. Oh, okay, it was just a book. It wasn't a dog barking that I need to run from or defend myself from, right? So orienting is an important part of that process. Also, holding our breath and pausing for a moment. What exactly is going on once we orient ourselves to the threat? And that's that stilling response. And if there indeed is a threat, and this doesn't necessarily have to be something obvious. It might be a trigger within our autonomic nervous system from past trauma, or just associations of something that's, something that's more stressful. It doesn't necessarily mean complex PTSD or PTSD when you have these automatic, what are called implicit responses in the body. They happen automatically. So we either go into a flight response. That is what human beings go into automatically. Unless you've been trained in martial arts or the military, you're not going to go right into fight. That's generally if you're cornered. That is, you don't feel a way out. So if you're doing public speaking, you might start to get a sense of, I want to get out of here. And then you might have a brief moment, if you're aware of it, because a lot of times we are not aware of these things. It takes a lot of training actually to become aware for most people. That you might get a sense of, I hate this. Why am I here? Right? That's sort of that's part of the fight response. Anger. Okay, coming up that there's a boundary here. I don't like this threat being here. I don't like to talk in public, right? If that's what the fear is, and that brings up your stress response. Okay, so if you can't get out of it, that is okay. Well, maybe you don't want to get out of it. Maybe you want to make sure you get a good grade in the class that you're in. And so you have to speak. And you've prepared, but you still have this feeling of your heart pumping and your dry mouth and so on, this stress response that's going on. You may start to feel the experience of the freeze or collapse response. So this is what all mammals experience when we have no ability to flee or fight our way out of a stressful situation. And in a social engagement situation where we perceive the threat, often we'll think it's not polite to. So we don't realize a lot of the time we go into this freeze response, which can show up in many different ways. It can show up as spacing out. It can show up as being less aware of your body. You're stuck in your head. It can show up as you lose your connection to your linguistic centers in your brain, can't think of the words, and you fumble over them.
Escapism, I would say, like those tendencies to go into social media. Like I would find myself, I've been off of Facebook for a while to test myself, but how many times did I find myself escaping into my apps? That's so normal. That is so, that could be an indication, not always, but that I'm actually dissociating, that I'm actually in this, like you're saying, this collapsed freeze space.
Now, if you don't have an actual way of getting out of it, and they're like, come on, stop looking at your phone, pay attention to me, then you're probably going to have it reinforced if you have no way of processing what's going on. But if you're able to take that phone and go, okay, I successfully flee the situation by dissociating, that's a little bit of a combination between the two. You're fleeing, that's that sympathetic mediated fight or flight response. I'm fleeing into my head. And I'm also in somewhat of a freeze response because I'm dissociating. Okay, so I'm going to get into more of the details of what symptoms fall into each of the branches of the nervous system. But I wanted to make it very clear that whenever we have some of these physiological responses, let's say classic example of being in fight or flight unconsciously is anxiety. If you have anxiety, your body is in a sympathetic nervous system mediated fight or flight response. That's what anxiety is. There are lots of different complexities around where it came from, how to treat it. I'm not getting into that. As an adaptation to stress in your nervous system, you feel anxiety. As a general point, I thought that important to mention. When you are depressed, that is an immobilized freeze symptom. It's a dissociation. It's a shutdown. It's immobilized in this freeze response. So depression or dissociating or being stuck in your head is actually a higher level of stress relative to feeling the anxiety. We shut off, endorphins flood our system, and we dissociate. So we don't have to feel it. That's adaptive, but it isn't necessarily helpful if we want to pay attention to our partner and we're off in our own world and we're just hearing want, like Charlie Brown. And they're going, aren't you listening to me? They don't necessarily recognize that you are unconsciously adapting to something you don't even realize is going on in your nervous system. And this is why I wanted to bring this to the surface, because someone in avoidant dismissive attachment will often go into a space where they dissociate. It's an immobilized response. It's not the same as an infant. It's adapted into adult life. And so it's not the same as thinking, okay, I can't escape. You don't consciously think that. You just immediately dissociate because your nervous system knows how to do that, to escape the high stress of social engagement. Okay, that's not always the case for every attachment style. These are generalizations, but if you know where the symptoms fall on the spectrum that I showed you in the beginning, that's why I placed the attachment styles at those specific parts of the stress response, the polyvagal curve, because it indicates a general pattern of what's going on that explains the different types of states you experience, primarily in your body. And then as a result of those body experiences, we feel emotions. And on top of that, we can start to describe it so that it goes up the layers of the brain. We have an autonomic response, totally unconscious. We have feelings that we may or may not feel that show up in our body language. And then we can put it into words to some degree. If we've blown our lid, chances are we're in either the fight or flight or freeze response or collapse or some form of high stress and all of the symptoms that go with that. And if we're in disorganized, we're going to oscillate between the two. And I'll go into more of that in a little bit. So in order to get out of this experience, we need to recover. We need to connect to resources. And near the end of this slide, Danielle and I will explain how we use specific modalities to help people connect to the present moment, as opposed to that past-based autonomic response that's responding to old threats that are familiar.
Yes.
And we can actually change that and go into a space of integration and back around full circle to social engagement. And this can be a long process. It can be a quick one. It depends on how many layers of adaptation you have going on, depends on how severe, and all sorts of other factors. But I just wanted to make it very clear that you can actually feel into and get a sense of what's going on, where you are in the threat cycle. And if you're in any of these spaces, you can actually go above and below the line of overwhelm into more mobilized feeling, where you feel the threat as anxiety perhaps, or you can't feel it and you're dissociated, spaced out, or just stuck in your head. So the long and the short of it is you can navigate this and you can learn to recognize where you are.
And I think that's what we're both really passionate about. I mean, we do work very similarly in what we do with our clients and even with our own personal growth and our own personal healing. But the idea is what we're doing now, what you're doing now so beautifully is you're doing a top-down approach to getting the information out there. So we're using our brains to absorb all of this, and that can be healing and cathartic. We're regulating down through the information we're learning. Towards the end, we'll be explaining different modalities that are bottom-up types of healing modalities and approaches, so that we're hopefully this is what we suggest, is that if you're in the healing process, you're doing both. You're simultaneously, doing top-down approaches and bottom-up approaches to your own healing, because both of those what we're going to be going into, we're going into the bottom-up. We're going into how do we befriend the nervous system? How do we understand what's happening? How are we reacting and acting? So I really appreciate how you're getting more clear on that, so that we can understand that big piece. This is the autonomic, unconscious realm, and it's way more powerful than what we understand. I mean, I've always been frustrated about that. Like, oh my goodness, I understand so much. I probably am oversaturated with understanding a lot of this, yet why does my body not keep up? So it's bringing ourselves to presence, which is really coming back into safety. As you just said, it's like, how do we do that? And so this is just steps towards that, understanding what's happening. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for giving us even more of an idea of what's happening in these cycles. So I'm going to take us to the next step, which I think is another great step. Do you have anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to quick clarify top down and bottom.
Yes.
If you look at top down regulation through the hand model of the brain, I'm assuming people can see me here. I can't see myself, so just checking. Yes, you can see me?
I'm just going to stop the share just in case.
All right, cool, thank you. So in the hand model of the brain, the cortex is controlling top down. That is consciously controlling what's happening to the processes underneath. Now, there's a limited capacity for our cortex to do that. That is, if we have too much stress going on in our bodies and our autonomic nervous system, our brainstem, and into our limbic brain, our attachment, memory, emotion, meaning-making, mammalian part, if there's too much stress that's being triggered, it's going to blow our lid, regardless of what our style is. Any extreme danger or threat or just really getting frustrated by something that's not working out. When we're dysregulated, we flip our lid. And so the bottom up experience takes over for our top down, which is what you were talking about. No matter what you know, your body's going to win every time. We call this ego fatigue. The idea that your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, which controls a lot of your conscious processes, it can only do so much to down regulate what's going on in the body. A top down approach that is cognitive. So cognitive behavioral therapy is not very effective for working with trauma. Why is that? It's because the trauma responses overwhelm cognition, and all the tools in cognitive behavioral therapy involve top down. Most of them. I'm not as familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, but I do know that the basic approach is going, okay, I'm going to change my mindset to control what's going on in my body. I'm going to change that based on those patterns. I'm going to think positively. I'm going to change my behaviors. I'm going to choose to do that. Whereas bottom up, what automatically happens? And so we have very limited capacity to control top down. And so what if we reduce what's going on in our bottom up experience, those automatic patterns? That's what Danielle and I mostly work with. I solely work with the body. And Danielle works with the body and expands up into the emotions and the cognitive realm as well. But if we can calm this, we don't have to worry about as much of the ego fatigue happening, blowing our lids. We have less stress down here because we've gotten in touch with our bodies so that our cognitive processes can work more effectively.
Yes.
If any of you were not able to function very well as children, I've had this experience where when I was younger, I thought I was stupid. I thought I just wasn't capable of very much intellectually. And I didn't understand that I had a traumatized brain. I didn't understand that my cortex was almost always blown and often disorganized. So someone would ask me a math problem and I'd burst into tears. Why? Because unconsciously, I know now, I didn't understand it at the time. I know now that I was reading their body language. They were disappointed in me. They couldn't explain it to me, no matter how hard they tried. Why? Because my cortex was not functioning well. It was offline. And so as a result, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get safe? How do I get safe? How do I get safe? And I had an emotional response, and somehow that was adaptive. It got them to stop asking me the question that I couldn't understand. It was an unconscious process. I had no idea. But as I learned to calm that part of my brain, that part of my body, my autonomic nervous system detecting threat, I discovered I actually have a fairly decent intellectual capacity. I'm willing to bet my IQ points jumped up about 30 points. That's my best guess. They actually did studies on children who were had trauma experiences early on and did specific techniques to release their trauma and to help them integrate and heal that. And the average IQ jump in those children was between 60 and 90 points more.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable.
Yes.
And so a lot of what excites me so much about this work, through my personal experience, I've discovered that we are not necessarily as limited as we think. The more we do this deep body work, which is often the last place we look, we go, how can I think differently? How can I, even through talk therapy, working on, okay, how can I approach behaviorally, the way that I'm doing my life? But if these bottom-up signals are overwhelming our cortex, often we will fail. And in a sense, it's not our faults that we're failing. Now, we can take responsibility for that, and we can choose to heal the bottom-up experience so that we have more control. We can continue to work on our behavioral control. I'm not saying not to do that, but until you address the bottom-up experience, you're fighting through quite a handicap.
You're like swimming upstream. You're swimming upstream. That's really what it is.
About the way I used to live life as walking upstream with a weight vest on. And I thought, like, why am I so slow compared to everyone else? And then I learned to take the weight vest off through the work I've done. And not only can I take the weight vest off, but I can turn around and I can flow down the stream. I can hop out of the stream metaphorically in terms of choosing different ways to function. I only had certain grooves available, neural grooves, that is patterns that I could repeat. Even in my 20s, I would work with people in personal training, and I would have pre-practiced things to say because I was so frozen in social situations. often I would get caught saying things that didn't fit, and it was very embarrassing. I knew it was the wrong thing to say, but my linguistic centers were completely offline to the point where I could only say the things I had practiced in advance. And so having come through to the other side and to be able to, not completely, but to a greater degree, in real time, go, what's going on now? What are the present circumstances? What's the person in front of me saying and doing? How am I feeling? What must they be feeling? And how might I connect, taking responsibility for my experience without addressing on a body level, that bottom up experience? It's not nearly as possible. And that applies directly to your attachment adaptation. That going on in the background will keep you from being able to do things you might very well want to do. If you're avoidant and you want to connect to people more, but you're just finding yourself overwhelmed, you might just blow people off or ghost them or just stop talking to them or space out or whatever it is. You need to address the bottom up experience so that you don't go into that freeze right away.
Yeah.
And if you're anxious and you're constantly reaching out and you find you're pushing people away because you overwhelm people, because you know you shouldn't, but you just can't help yourself. They haven't texted me yet. I need to text them back.
Right.
Feel this compulsion. That's a survival response on an unconscious level. And consciously, you're feeling this appearance that you think you need to do certain things in order to get them back, which as an infant worked. You cried a lot and your parent came back. But as an adult, that protest behavior doesn't work out so well. And so we can have compassion for ourselves and each other. That's really important distinction in this experience. What's going on under the surface? And how can we best approach that? So I really appreciate you bringing up that bottom up versus top down functioning experience and how to work with that, Danielle. Thank you.
Yeah,
because
you're welcome.
it's so key in understanding what's going on behaviorally, top down, you might say, how we choose to behave with our cortex. I'm choosing, right? Versus what automatically comes up. And how do I manage that?
Right.
So,
Yes. Yes. So coming back to this wonderful subject of, I guess, adding more detail into, well, I guess we've talked a lot about this, but if you can just review what we've talked about and how, again, this goes into those experiences, those single arousal experiences, and how we all will fall on different levels. So just, I guess, going over this and continuing on.
Yeah. So this looks very similar to the first slide that was shown, the polyvagal curve. This is the same thing. That is the multiple branches of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, that is the part of our nervous system that controls what's going on in our survival response so that we can adapt to our environment all unconsciously. So what does that lead to? Well, if you look at the bottom of that chart, that's the lowest level of stress, you might say. So that's mediated by what's called the ventral vagal parasympathetic response. All that means is that you are regulated. Your nervous system perceives safety. So you're capable of keeping your cortex lid online. You haven't blown your lid here. You're able to regulate yourself because you're not overwhelmed by what's going on underneath the surface in the moment, or past traumas or associations that I need to be on alert. That's not present when you're down there and connected to social engagement. You're more fully human here. But as you move up to the middle branch, you can see some of the states, the symptoms, you might say, that are connected with the fight or flight response. It's sympathetic nervous system mediated. Often in elementary school, we're taught, okay, there's the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight response, so that we can, rise to the occasion when there's a threat and protect ourselves or run away and, get away from that threat or whatever we need to do. And parasympathetic, rest and digest. Well, it turns out there are two branches of the parasympathetic nervous system. The ventral vagal down at the bottom there, that's more human. That is, we read each other's body language. So tone of voice, our prosody, the quality and tone, the ability to change inflection and to change our facial expressions, our gestures, our postures. We read those things well when we're down in the social engagement circuit. That is the ventral vagal parasympathetic branch. And we're less capable of doing that when we're in the sympathetic fight or flight response. Panic, fear, anxiety, rage, irritation, worry, and concern. That's a mobilized, movement-oriented experience. But the other branch is connected to the more primitive part of our nervous system, the brainstem in the triune brain, so the palm in that model, right?
The reptilian part.
The reptilian, yeah. The freeze body collapse response that happens when we're in that high level of stress. So stress and trauma in that sense are interchangeable because we can go up and down this chart at any point in the day. The key is, can we finish that arousal cycle and come back down into social engagement or not, right? And when we have past traumas and attachment patterns that are insecure or disorganized, we're less likely to be able to integrate ourselves back down as easily. We can do it, but it may take more resources, more practice. And so in a sense, the journey to secure, the further dysregulated you are, is in a sense a superpower because of what you have to do to learn to regulate yourself. You have far more resilience than someone who was always secure. So it's not always a bad thing to have non-secure attachment, because the journey back is this, you might even say it's a spiritual journey of coming back home, coming back into yourself. So I again wanted to point out the dorsal vagal, that is the reptilian shutdown response at the top there, is an immobilization zone. So notice what the symptoms are there: dissociation, numbness, depression. You're conserving energy here. So think of someone who has avoidant dismissive attachment. Okay, too much. Gotta get away. I can't handle too much social engagement. That's an adaptation from infancy that we do not remember. And that's a really high level of stress that they can achieve like that. And so they might stay partially dissociated on a regular basis. And by the way, I am a combination of anxious and avoidant. That is, I go up and down, above and below that line of overwhelm between the freeze and the fight flight response. That's where disorganized, where you're not only flipped your lid, but your thumb comes out here that represents your limbic brain. You're disorganized. Run away or go close. Hot and cold behavior. The experience of, for example, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I wrote a post on this a while back, and I shared it on the attachment community. How is ADHD like PTSD? How is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder like post-traumatic stress disorder? Well, in both, you experience these ups and downs above and below the line of overwhelm, where you're immobilized. Let's say you're spaced out in PTSD. That would be probably an extreme dissociation. And also hyperactivity. A car backfires, and someone who is in a war will drop down. They don't do that consciously. They don't consciously say, oh, I must be in a war, that must be a bomb. Their body reacts first. And in ADHD, you oscillate between being spaced out and hyperactive. Okay, I'm really excited. Let's do this, and people with the ADHD experience will go above and below that line. And notice how I did that in a positive way. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Any one of these branches you can actually create as a combination with the social engagement system. You can downregulate it and have a new experience. So in that middle zone where it's fight or flight response, what's the positive downregulated version? Sort of a combination between the bottom two. That's play, where you're, let's say, in sports, and you're wrestling with someone, for example, play fighting. You don't actually want to hurt them, but you're engaged, you're mobilized, you're moving. And it's actually a really positive experience. When you're in a completely relaxed state and it's blissful rather than shut down, that would be a downregulated version of the freeze response. That is, in yoga, shavasana, I believe it's called, where you're in corpse pose and you're just blissfully relaxed. And you may not be as in touch with your body, but you have all these wonderful endorphins going through your body, and you're in a really happy place. Sometimes that can look like spiritual bypassing, where I look at all of these amazing concepts and you might miss some social cues with somebody around you. And as you're talking about this amazing concept of empathy and compassion, you might be stepping on somebody's foot and have no idea you're doing it. Yeah. It's sort of a silly example, but you can experience dissociation in a positive way. You can experience being revved up in a positive way. So let's not pigeonhole the trauma experiences and the attachment styles into all negative experiences, because there are gifts that fall there too. So I want to just give a sense that
Yes.
each of these branches of the nervous system have very specific symptoms. At the top, immobilization, immobile, non-movement. In the middle, sympathetic branch, it's movement oriented. It feels, you feel a lot here. And when you're down at the bottom, you feel and you're able to move.
Yes.
And so that's a very generalized experience. And like I said, you can have combinations of different activations in different parts. But when you understand what the symptoms are that you're experiencing, you can actually chart yourself. Go, oh, I'm right
That's where
here.
I am. Right. That's where I am. I'm here now. And I think a lot of people, a lot of clients will say, well, I don't want to be in the red, or there's this idea that being in fight or flight is a negative. So I do want to just add there that that is just mobile, you're mobilized there. So if you notice that little squiggly line between green and red, that's where, you know, we want to stay. We want to stay mobilized and engaged, mobilized and engaged. And we want to do that without, I mean, that's what we're all doing in our nervous befriending of our nervous systems. We're trying to keep our arch or our little bell curve more down towards the green so that we don't have to do all of this work when we get up into the blue. And that's where we, you know, as you all can see and as I've heard Mike talk about, that's where it's a highly stressed place to be in our system. So we're all learning to try to get into that beautiful balance, whatever that is, but also like what we're doing now, we're trying to just get into our systems and say, where am I now? Understanding that with compassion and just meeting ourselves where we're at. So I do appreciate that. And I'm also looking, and we knew this would be a little bit longer, so I'm enjoying this. And I know there's a lot of information to get out. So just being conscious of the time and everybody's time, but also just being thorough. This is a lot of necessary information. So any more thoughts about this? I know we have a few more pieces to add.
I think we can move on for now, because I do eventually, by the end, want to address strategies we can use in order to navigate where we are on the polyvagal curve. But
yeah, I think yeah.
We can do that with roots of safety, right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's really what we're doing when we explore the last activity, is really getting clear on our specific tools that we're using to bring ourselves back down into the green. So what are those? Exploring those, getting more familiar with those, and also maybe even looking to develop other areas, which we'll talk about. So I know you wanted to touch on memory and perception. So I thought we could do a little bit of that and then get into the other topics. So go ahead and share that screen.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that, Danielle. So I know that this chart is not
it's not so clear.
But I'll explain what's here, and if you can't read it, don't worry about it. All I want you to get is that the top half, the top two, are explicit memory. That is, we're able to consciously navigate them. Whereas implicit, on the bottom half, the third and the fourth types of memory are implicit, that is unconscious. Okay, so what I want to get across here is that these are all layers of memory going on all the time. And all memory is we have an experience, and all of our senses are involved in storing an association with that experience. So if it's powerful enough, we remember it. That is, we can recall the encoding of that neurological pattern. So if you learn to ride a bike, you have to learn how to balance. You need to learn how to steer. You need to learn how to pedal. And you need to be able to do that automatically so you can focus on something else. So you start at the explicit declarative level of, I want to learn to ride a bike. But you can't learn to ride a bike by saying, I want to learn how to ride a bike, can you? Just like you can say, I have this attachment behavior and I want to shift it. It's not really going to do much. What you need to do is get down into the deeper layers of what's going on. And by the way, this is layers of memory and perception. You might say neurological function. That is, there are simultaneous layers going on. The neural firing that happens at the deepest layer in the body, we'll call it implicit procedural. That's what it's called, or body memory. And as those things, those neurological patterns happen, to ride a bike, for example, all of the things that you've learned are happening automatically, right? So just like riding a bike, right? Once you learn the skill, it's automatic. You can just do it. You don't think about it. Your nerves are firing in a way that allows your body to coordinate that experience of balancing, of pedaling, of steering. So you can do that automatically and look at the person next to you for a moment and not fall off the bike. Or you can go, where am I going? I'm thinking about the route that I'm going to take. Where am I going to ride my bike? And I don't have to think about the steering or the balance or the pedaling. I'm just doing that. I might periodically think about, okay, I want to pedal harder because I'm going up a hill. But most of that is automatic. And that happens at the deeper implicit emotional level, implicit procedural level. And so in order to learn a skill, this needs to happen when you're in safety.
Yeah.
And you might not be in complete safety, you just probably won't learn the skill very well. That's why if someone's yelling at you when you're first learning something, you're probably not going to learn it very well. And if you do, it's going to be associated with a pretty negative experience, and you're probably not going to want to. So I personally don't like male typical activities, because my father yelled at me every time he taught me how to build something with wood, build a tree fort. He was like, Mike, why can't you, and after, never teaching me it in the first place, he would expect me to get it. To fix something in a car. He was a hunter. I avoided all of those things because I had an association with those things. Like, I must be horrible at it. I didn't understand that that was not a very healthy way to teach someone. So on my implicit procedural memory level, there was an emergency response. My body went, no, whenever those activities come up. Need to fix something in the house, Mike? I don't really like fixing things in the house. I'll do it if I have to, but I have to work through it. Why? Because I didn't learn that as a positive experience. And so it wasn't safe for me to learn those patterns, and my cognitive capacities were less available. So why am I telling you all of this? When you learn your autonomic patterns in your body, that is, someone tries to help you with something, and you're not used to someone reaching out and helping you with something. You're used to doing it by yourself. Let's say you have a dismissive avoidant attachment style, and the adaptation was to be as autonomous as possible. You're even going to say autonomy is the most important thing, most likely.
Your values will be structured around that in the beginning. Yes.
Exactly. Your values are actually determined by early experiences to a large degree. There's also temperament, there's also genetics, there's epigenetic changes. Let's generalize, because we need to get the basic pattern of what's going on. When you're in a particular attachment adaptation, what's going on in the nervous system, right? So I just explained the dismissive avoidant experience. Your body's probably going to have a stress response, and you might go right into that immobilized, I just need space. Or to get to that space, you might need to do a little bit of sympathetic mediated flight, or you might get really angry that they're not leaving you alone. And that's also sympathetic mediated. So that's mobilized. But what's the point? Where are you trying to get to? You're trying to get space. You're trying not to socially engage. You're trying to get away because it's overwhelming. That's that immobilization response. So what's happening is primarily happening on a body level, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And then above what's happening deep in the neurons and those automatic firing patterns that are happening based on whatever associations we have with that particular experience, like for me, learning to fix stuff, I'm having a stress response happen that I'm not aware of. My body language will show it though. And that's the implicit emotional, the next layer up. It's still unconscious. Somebody says, hey, Mike, can you help me? I'm at home, let's say when I was a kid, 16 or something, right? I was 16 years old, and my brother, who was probably 15 at the time, 14 or 15, depending on what time of the year it was, he might say, hey, Mike, can you help me fix my bike? I might immediately have a feeling like, I don't want to do that. And I might show that look on my face. And I might say, yeah, sure. But you can see by my body language, my implicit emotional expression, I'm not actually in a good place. I don't have a positive association with that. And I'm probably going to recall my explicit episodic, that is the second one down there, the emotional experience as an episode. I might remember my dad teaching me how to fix a bike and yelling at me as that was happening. And I might be able to put that into words. And that's that explicit declarative. So by the time we get up into what we can consciously recognize, it's important to recognize that, ironically, it's important to try and recognize that we can't recognize what's going on. Yeah. It's so deep. We need to figure out how to connect to our bodies and downregulate that stress response, primarily down there in the implicit level. Because if we don't do that, working up here, we're going to blow our lids and it's going to be very unlikely to be successful. We need to do bottom up primarily, and of course, a combination between the two.
Yeah.
But the most powerful part is from the body first, to calm that stress response down so that we have a fighting chance of changing our behavior. That's why addicts, for example, people who struggle with addiction have such a hard time. They're constantly blowing their lids every time they see an advertisement for whatever their addiction of choice is. And I put the term choice very loosely. There's some choice involved, but again, their bottom up signals are just constantly overwhelming their capacity. They might do well in the beginning of the day, but by that 100th time, their unconscious associations have gone, I want a drink of alcohol. I want a drink of alcohol. I want a drink of alcohol. By noon, most people will be like, why are you drinking at noon? They don't understand that that person has had implicit urges that they've been repressing probably hundreds of times all day.
Yes.
It's not to justify the behavior, it's to elicit some compassion for what's going on underneath the surface. Now, this talk isn't about addiction, but I wanted to use that example because, in a sense, we are unconscious behavioral patterns that happen, and we can choose to craft that. But the more trauma and negative associations that automatically happen, the more work we have to do to effectively downregulate, that is top-down downregulate, and calm our emotional experiences. So that top-down approach, hey, why don't you just, why can't you just change? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in my life around different examples of, Mike, why are you always so spaced out? Mike, why can't you pay attention? I used to be able to pass out on my feet while at a party standing up. It was an adaptation of such an extreme freeze response because of what was going on unconsciously. I didn't know why. But I was like, wow, this is a neat trick. I can fall asleep on my feet. I don't know very many people who can do that.
Yeah, and looking at yourself now, I mean, it's almost like you're saying to yourself, I appreciate you're looking back and then bringing yourself to the present moment and saying, I mean, that's the work you've done to take these new ways of being. I mean, that's proof that you've done this growth work, that you can say today that, that I have overcome that, and what other methods you're using. And I think those of us that are journeying towards healing, journeying towards earned secure attachment, it's really important to do what you're doing, which is look back and remember, because sometimes we're just like, is this ever going to get better? Especially those of us with a lot of trauma, to be able to really look back and give ourselves that big hug, that pat on the back to say, that's the way it used to be. And so it's a great example of just understanding we're going to have to replace those automatic, unconscious, implicit responses. And we're working that earned secure journey is replacing it with security, replacing it with, that's on a mind, body, spirit level. It's a journey on all levels. So I do appreciate you just bringing that up. And how do we go back and really give ourselves the credit, those of us on this lifetime journey, to say, yeah, that's how I used to be. And this is who I am today, and celebrate those as we're continuing to peel back the layers, which seem like it can take forever. So, and, getting back into the graph, I think it's a great way to go into the next segment, which is giving ourselves, hold on one second, a chance to linking the parts. So when we're dissociated, when we're dealing with a lot of trauma responses, we're either in chaos or rigidity. So I know you wanted to get into this part. And so I love this because we all want to be in that river of integration, that widened window of tolerance. So just going into that a little bit, and then we can go into a great activity that will just kind of help bring everything that Mike's talking about together.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm really looking forward to your guided exercise coming soon. So this slide here is from Dan Siegel from the Mindsight Institute. So it's where he teaches his concepts on interpersonal neurobiology. So this is all his work right here. This slide and the hand model of the brain and a number of things are from him. I haven't given specific credit to other people for the other parts, but needless to say, these are not my ideas. They are from established scientists that have put their theories to the test, and they've drawn it from a lot of research and a lot of application. So river of integration, what does this mean? You may notice in the center here, where it says the river of integration, that there are 5 words, and it's what Dan Siegel refers to as faces flow. That is, it's an acronym for flexible, We're able to be flexible in this experience. If someone wants something and we're in the middle of something else, we might be able to put our reading material down and go, yeah, I can help you for a moment, and not be all bent out of shape about it. We can be flexible with giving and also with receiving. Someone wants to help us out with something, and we can receive that fully. So we're flexible. Adaptive, that is, we can adapt to the situation that is at hand. We can be present and go, I might want to act a little bit differently based on these current circumstances. You know, if I am walking on an ice rink, I might want to get some ice skates, or I might want to walk really slowly, or I'm probably going to slip and fall. I adapt to my environment and I notice what's going on. I'm present, I'm aware. So flexible, adaptive, coherent, that is, I'm present and able to navigate what's going on within that adaptive capacity of what's going on in this present moment, right? I'm able to coherently speak about my experience. That's that explicit, declarative. I can put into words coherently what my experience is or someone else's. I can be energized. That is, I have the energy available. I'm not in that immobilized shutdown, or I'm not wasting energy spinning my wheels, you know, with, for example, protest behavior, where I'm reaching, knowing it's not going to help anything. And I know that consciously, but I'm wasting energy. So I'm energized when I'm in that middle state, and I'm also stable. So notice that spells faces. Faces flow when we are integrated. So when we're not integrated, we experience either chaos or rigidity on either bank of that river of integration. So on one side, it's more chaotic, unpredictable, unstable. That would probably be more in line with that middle part of the polyvagal curve. So if you'll notice, in the beginning, I said the anxious attachment style tends to be more sympathetic nervous system mediated. That is, they're more connected. They have more neural grooves around the fight or flight response. So they're going to be mobilized. That is movement oriented. They're able to feel, and often very deeply. And it's chaotic. It's unstable. It's unpredictable. And so that's not integrated. So this actually comes from complexity theory, where complex systems, when they are functioning well, when they're coherent, they experience what Dan Siegel calls integration. That is, they have this faces flow, right? Flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable. But when they're not, they experience either chaos or rigidity. He actually broke down the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Every single diagnosis fits into either a symptom of chaos, of rigidity, or both. Interesting. And if you look at the polyvagal curve, you can apply that concept of when I'm not integrated, when I'm not present and in a low stress state, right, at the bottom of that polyvagal curve. When I'm not there, when I'm up a little bit higher on that curve, I'm chaotic. When I'm all the way up to overwhelm and shutdown, the immobilization realm, I'm more rigid, controlling, not flexible. Isn't that interesting? That it doesn't, people often look at the window of tolerance, like, okay, I'm in my window of tolerance, I can function well. And if I'm hyperactive, I go up. And if I'm hypoactive, I go down. When you look at the polyvagal curve, it's not linear like that. It's actually the middle of this chart where we're coherent, flexible, adaptive, energized, stable. When we're integrated, when things are working well, our nervous systems are regulated.
Yes.
We are not chaotic or rigid. We're able to move. We're not rigid. And we're able to organize it. We're not chaotic, right? But as we go up, we experience chaos, that upper part of this chart. And as we go even further, higher in stress, we experience rigidity of some form, right? Mobilization, immobilization. So the more you can understand what's going on in the different parts of the nervous system, as that polyvagal chart shows, the more you can recognize how exactly are you out of integration? How are you disintegrated?
Yes.
You have impaired integration. So what is integration? I should probably define that. Integration, as defined by Dr. Danielle Siegel, is the linkage of differentiated parts. So interestingly enough, when you look at the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and you look at the cortex and look deeply at the structures, I believe they're called corpuscles. There are layers going down the left side of the brain, 7 layers that are very focused and concentrated, more so on the left side of the brain. So you might say that the left side of the brain is very organized. That is, it's very precise. It's very linear. It's very A plus B equals C. It's being able to predict what's going on. Now, I know the left and right brain hemisphere dichotomy has been largely disproved in a general way, but it's just interesting to notice that the structures are set in a particular way that allow it to be adaptive in unique ways. So we just might change the way we look at left and right hemisphere mediated experiences. We may not understand it fully. We may not understand it fully, but the right side doesn't connect those layers as directly. Instead, it's more peripheral and it's linked. All of the different clusters are linked in this really elaborate web, whereas there's less linkage on this side. So the right side of the brain is more linked, but it's not as organized and structured as the left side. So working together, you have this differentiated left hemisphere function, the ability to go, I know all of these concepts, and the right side goes, I can interconnect them. They're differentiated and they are linked. That's integration. So ultimately, that's what secure attachment functioning is the ability to use both opposing capacities of the human experience.
Yes.
And I'm way generalizing here. So please don't take my words and say, hey, Mike said the right brain does this and the left brain did this. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you can learn some very unique patterns when you take a general principle and go, I wonder how this makes sense. And just looking at the structure of the left and right hemispheres and how they're organized, it's very interesting to note that it would more likely be rigid on the left side. That is, they're less interconnected. Each structure is very in depth, but they're not as well linked. Whereas the right side, they are absolutely well linked and they're not as deep. So you can look at the positive and negative of chaos and rigidity, right? Which is what integration is taking those positive qualities of both. So instead of chaos, it's interlinked, right? More global. And instead of rigid, it's organized, right? So you have this integration of these qualities that you can achieve when your stress levels are lower. So I know I've thrown a lot of concepts at you. My hope is that these slides helped to put into a visual some of what I've been talking about, and hopefully has given you a clearer sense of, okay, this is what's going on in my nervous system versus this is my actual behavior. And Danielle's about to go over a guided exercise around roots to safety. Jake Ernst is a creator.
You had one more piece you actually wanted to review, but I just thought we could just stop. I don't know, I'm not able to see any of the questions. I just thought we could stop for a minute and see if you can just check in on questions. I mean, again, this is a lot of heady stuff. It's very important. It's to be taken in as whatever's useful for you in your journey. I know some of us get a little overwhelmed. This is all really important pieces of information, but just to take it in gently. I don't know if you see any questions or we can answer any of those. I'm sure,
Comments of appreciation. Someone was trying to find the Facebook Live. Tambi, I hope you did find that. It's being broadcast from my page and I shared it here on the attachment community, if that's where you are. And Wendy Stokes said, I appreciate informative teaching videos. Thanks. It would be nice if we could share too. Are they on YouTube? You'll be able to share it from my Facebook page. And I will also post this on YouTube when we're finished. So no worries.
Great. So so I did want you to just, I mean, I know the one thing you wanted to do is maybe sum it up a little bit with the layers of consciousness. So I'll go ahead and I'll put up that chart. But I think it's just, again, taking this in however you can, taking what works. I think that's just a great way to approach anything if we can, for those of us that have perfectionists or, get overwhelmed with new information. It's one step at a time. And hoping that that just is your experience. And of course you could rewatch it. So I know you wanted to go over, I mean, this is another way of looking at integration, on all levels of self. So I thought this would be nice to just go over. And I know if anybody's interested, this is what Mike does with all of his clients. He helps them integrate on these specific levels. So go ahead. I would love to hear you talk more about it.
Thanks, Danielle. So this chart, the layers of consciousness, is taken from a number of different systems. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see the layers of needs here that are implied that align with Maslow's hierarchy in the pyramid that he often showed it on. And Tony Robbins and Chloe Madonis actually came up with something similar in terms of their categories of human needs: the need for certainty, the need for uncertainty, significance, how am I important, being loved, growth and service. And I added in to align these with the chakras, that is the human qualities that align with our energy centers in the Ayurvedic yogic system, right? I don't know exactly how you would label that, but I've taken the basic concepts there and connected it also with Claire Graves' value systems. That is the development of our societies over time, the development of an individual over time, and also the layers of our experience that are simultaneously operating. I know that was a mouthful. What I want you to get from this is the bottom layer is foundational for every other layer above it. So if you take a look there, the need for certainty, that first category, the bottom of the pyramid, notice on the right, it says somatic integration. Soma means the body. So it's about integrating, sensing, and linking the differentiated experiences we have in the present moment. This is the foundation for bottom-up work in the body.
Yes.
So we're integrating on all of these different layers, starting with the foundation of, can I cultivate a calm nervous system response, safety in the nervous system so I can socially engage, so I can use the best, most human parts of my triune brain, right? The primate level of qualities like empathy, compassion, forethought, creativity, problem solving, and so on. I need to take that bottom-up approach of calming that body, that stress response, so that I don't as easily blow my lid. And beyond the body, so remember I talked about the layers of memory and perception that are always happening. At the top there, you have your words. Well, this is a more detailed chart showing how we can navigate the human experience, integrating specific layers and prioritizing what's most important. So the body is the most important. That's what I want people to get out of looking at this chart. I can go into more details if you would like to reach out to me. You can see the second layer is psychological integration. So beliefs, values, looking at the archetypal structures of our experience. That is, what are the character types, the images that come to mind with different characteristics you have. And this is the integration of our psychological layer. And again, integration, the linkage of differentiated parts. I have a part of me that psychologically is a child. That is my child self has those patterns that come up. And it's another way to organize those, for example, trauma patterns that might show up as the attachment adaptation that's happening primarily in the body. So I need to differentiate and link all my different sensations in the present moment at the bottom layer. But then how does that show up in the picture of archetypes? My child archetype, my savior archetype, right? My leader archetype. My Kokopelli, what's it called? The trickster archetype. When I'm making mischief, we have these different aspects to ourselves that we can characterize as psychological pictures, archetypes. And then we go up to the third layer of linguistic integration. How do I put that into words? Notice that I'm already at the top of the memory chart as far as the layers of memory. So these bottom three layers are our human experience in a very autonomic way. That is the parts that bottom up affect our behavior in ways that we don't recognize necessarily. And then going up to heart integration. We all have the same needs and feelings. Can I recognize my own and others and link my experience of emotion, of feeling with my needs and the needs of others, so I can relate to them, so I can collaborate, so I can have empathy for them and compassion. That's the fourth layer. Going up to mastery as a fifth level, I am an individual and I master something very specific and I offer that to people and that feels good to me. It integrates my individuality potentially with other people as I work together in a team. And that's what layer 6 holistic integration is. How do I take my mastery and somebody else's mastery? How do we work together? How do we see that we're all valuable in our own unique way? And then ultimately the 7th layer is about embodied presence, the integration of taking all of these pieces of our individuality from our body and our emotions and our mind and our relationships and our society and our gifts within that. And how do we embody that in our experience? How do we take all 7 layers of that human experience, all 7 layers of what I call layers of human consciousness, and integrate that by addressing, okay, what's a layer that's not integrated? And most often, the somatic layer at the base. When you address that, it will start to reorganize the layers above it automatically, because you have less to fight of those automatic responses that you're not in control of. So calm that body. That's what I wanted to get across with this pyramid. And again, we could go into details about that, but that's the gist. And it helps you to perhaps navigate a little bit more masterfully, with a little more discernment.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you talk about, I mean, again, what we focused on was mostly the bottom 2 layers, but I think there's something to say about what we're seeing in different communities, different spiritual communities. And even I'll just say within myself, because I am a spiritual person, this idea that sometimes we go too far up into these upper layers and we don't have this integrated layer 1, layer 2 experience. So it's, in a sense, it's kind of like we're a Tetris game. I mean, I used to play Tetris all the time, and it's kind of like we have, you know, when you get to that ends part where, you know, there's maybe 1 or 2 holding up the whole piece of the game. It's like, in a sense, when we don't embody, when we don't go into the body, when we don't learn how to navigate our nervous system responses, we end up kind of bypassing. So when I hear people say spiritual bypassing, a lot of times that to me is like, I just think it's an issue with embodiedness. And I think a lot of us think we're embodied. And I sometimes say, wow, you know, I really do feel like I'm in my body. But I have to tell you, I think that's a big question we should be asking ourselves. How deep are we in our bodies? And I think a lot of these somatic modalities that we'll be talking about, and I think that some of the great ones out there, Peter Levine's work, any type of somatic healing work, and it's hot right now because it's really, we're a culture of disembodied people. So I think that those 2 layers, I love how you just specified that. That's how we get up to that pinnacle point. And not one layer is better than the other. I think there's sacredness in all layers. So for me, being one person that tried to go up and just be up in that spiritual space, I was escaping there a bit. And so going into the body is a hero's journey. And yeah, so thank you for clarifying that. And that's the beautiful work that you've done. So I do appreciate how you've integrated all of that for us to just at least have a scaffolding. It's like, that's our ladder towards healing. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I love the point you brought up about, in general, where our society is in terms of embodiment, being connected to our body. There is a general society dissociation. It's normal to focus on our achievements, to focus on, you know, how much money am I making? You know, how impressive is, you know, my house or my car, or, you know, what
my body,
person,
my body.
Yeah, my body.
How
you know,
impressive is my body? Ooh,
fitness,
you know?
industry, the whole, you know, relationship coaching community. There is an element of, what quality of person did I attract and am I with? And what does that say about me? This is very dissociated, very disconnected with essence from our bodies, that will actually give us a sense of, okay, what actually feels right? And feels right is because we have such a disconnection in general. I mean, I love
that you said that. I love it.
This awareness is so limited in terms of what do we bring in each moment through our senses. Every second we bring in, 126 bits per second through our senses. So a bit is a half of a computer byte for those of you who want to know what that measurement means. So very small amount per second, but every second we're bringing 126 bits, and we shift that focus of attention consciously to, you know, whatever it is that we're paying attention to. When somebody is dissociated enough, you know, a bomb could go off metaphorically, you know, and they might be like, huh? If they're very, very focused, right? Well, what about all of the other things that are happening? Do we take those into? The answer is yes. Unconsciously, below conscious awareness, we take in not 126. Unconsciously, we take in 2 million bits per second. That's a lot of influence beyond what we can consciously recognize. To say, I'm a totally conscious person and I know exactly what's going on and I know exactly who I am and what I'm about is arrogant at best. We have no idea who we are. We have no idea what we're capable of in good and bad ways. So by focusing in on what we're consciously aware of, as well as why don't we address that bottom up 2 million bits per second in our nervous systems and what we take in, because if we're programmed based on past traumas or associations to focus on the negative aspects of things, guess what life is going to be? It's going to be this big, scary world where everyone's mean. And that largely shapes our perception. Where are we focusing that 126 bits every second? We can shift that within the sea of 2 million bits unconsciously that come in. Where am I focusing my attention?
Yes.
And often we can live in the exact same world, and through different perceptions, through different focus of attention that automatically happens, we can see 2 totally different worlds standing right next to each other. What are you focusing on? And it's not as easy as saying, okay, what am I focusing on? You can't just discover it. It's a process over a lifetime. Yep, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I just wanted to kind of ride off of what you were saying. Like, I have an idea of what we could focus on in this moment. Now, just getting into that point of self-mastery, humility. Do I really know what I want? Do I really know who I am? I mean, we do label, we hold on to labels. All of that helps us feel more safe and secure. So there's something to that. But getting stuck, that's actually going to inhibit us when we do get stuck in those spaces of over labeling or over identifying. It's all very important, but it's also, like you said, too much rigidity. So I thought it was a little joke. It was like, well, I have an idea. Let's just get into our bodies a little bit. I think that what you and I are really excited about is Jake Ernst's amazing methodology of bringing ourselves into safety through, instead of love languages, it's our routes to safety. So I use this with my clients. I've been using this since I've heard about it, I'd say about a year ago. So he's a genius guy. I'm going to put some links in so you can see more about his work. Lots of props to what he does. So I'm going to take you into a little activity. So wherever you are, just getting in your seat, starting to feel your feet on the ground, and just starting to tap a little bit more into your senses. I'm going to go ahead and just bring you to the next piece. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and if you're not in the right place, just create an atmosphere for yourself. Shut your door, feel your feet on the ground. I'm just going to calm our minds just to get into a space of finding some quiet. So with your eyes open or closed, softening those eye muscles, softening those shoulders, opening up your jaw a bit, letting it sink back into the hinge, just bringing ourselves into our senses a bit more, out of the minds, into the body. I want you to just bring to mind a recent event where you felt moderately stressed or triggered. Let's just say a 5, nothing too major, but it was definitely something within the last week where it was relational and it really sent you into a space of arousal. And this isn't the good kind. So just go ahead and bring that moment, that memory to mind. Just start to see certain things that were going on around you, who's there. Just start to pinpoint, start to take note, start to bring in the auditory sense, maybe hear any sounds, any words that were used, just getting familiar, bringing in our sense of sound and getting familiar with what it sounded like in that moment. How about the feeling? How did it feel in your body? Notice. How did it feel when you were watching the other person in this situation? Just bringing in a bit of memory. We're just narrating. We're getting an anchoring to that moment. So just getting that basic memory and just putting it in a nice solid box. So we're just giving it, we're kind of stamping it. What I want you to do is I want you to bring that memory back into the present. So just start to wiggle your fingers and toes, softening the eyes into the space, bringing in some lights, just coming back into this moment. I want you to keep this memory as we start to go through the rest of, I'm just going to work you through explaining Jake's amazing system. So what we do, and this moment and many others, you can come back to the moment, you can stay in your quiet space. We go and do certain things right after that. So what did you do right after that? Just remember. And we're kind of bringing ourselves out of that. We don't want to associate too much. Just loosely remember then what happened right after. How did you handle this? What did you do? Where did you go? Who did you reach out to if you did? So start to remember what those things were. Did you step into action? So basically what we understand is when we get highly stressed, and I'm going to stick with the relational realm, we tend to do similar things to take ourselves back to safety. So going into his system, just going to go through some of his basic ideas. So for some of us, we step into a space of inner guidance. It's a self-sourced space. We go within ourselves. There's sensory experience. We go into our own personal senses. This is a self-resource space. Private retreat. Some of us go, you know what, I've just been really stressed out. I need to go somewhere to be by myself. So again, that's self-resourced. For some of us, we immediately reach out to those people that we feel really close to, and we talk to them, we lean on them. Sometimes we seek proximity with those people. We go to them. So these are socially sourced ways of downregulating our systems. And common humanity, you know, maybe we just go and we just go to a group. Maybe we have a group that we go to, and that's where we get into safety. That's where we get into our own social engaged space. Some of us step right into action to feel safe. So we might protect ourselves. We might just put up some boundaries. For some of us, we then structure ourselves with a more certainty and structure, and that's action oriented. So these are some of the methods we use. So getting familiar with those is really important. I'm actually going to bring up another slideshow. But for Mike, for you, just give us an idea of what you were able to, like, so the event, you don't have to go into that, but what did you notice? What do you tend to lean towards?
So two things. Immediately, the first place I go is private retreat. I go into my own space. You know, there's a spot in my living room on the couch that I tend to sit when I'm meditating, and I'll also get a soft blanket and just try and calm myself a little bit. So I was having an argument, and it didn't feel fair. So as I got into my private retreat space, I started noticing my senses, and it was really hard to stay there. I wanted to go into my head. I wanted to think about all the things that they said that weren't right, that were unfair. And it was really hard, but I know I always feel better when I go into my senses. And I meditated in a mindfulness way. So focusing in mindfulness in this context means focusing on sensations in the present moment. So it's counterintuitive. You might think mindfulness is about going into the mind. It's actually the opposite. And that downregulates the stress response. So I know that that was helpful. And finally, after that private retreat, going into my sensations, I reached out to you, actually, told you all about the experience, and tried to get some empathy, which you did. You're very good at that. So I used 3, but when I was younger, in early adulthood, I definitely would not have reached out to someone else that didn't feel as safe to me. I would internalize it. And I certainly wouldn't be in my senses as much. So it's something I've developed over time.
Yeah. So those, I mean, it's interesting because and I bet you if you took those 2, you could kind of gauge that those are your 2 most developed routes to safety. So you use them mostly. And so you and I have talked about this a lot, and it's exciting to kind of link some of these with what we understand about our attachment style. So the first 3 are self-resource. Now, again, all of them, it doesn't mean that only anxious people use these. I think that all of us use all of them, but we tended to see a little pattern. So the first three, self-resourced, tended to be more comfortable for those with an avoidant attachment style. The middle three are more socially sourced. So I would say someone who is more secure in their functioning and more anxious, leaning anxious, they would tend to feel much more comfortable leaning towards others. And the last two, they're more action oriented. I tend to go to those as well. They can, it's a mixed bag here, but I think that we talked about how, whether you're fearful, avoidant, or disorganized, I know we kind of were a little bit, we were pondering how those can be, they're more mobilized. So I would say that would be anxious or secure. But avoidance, I mean, I have an avoidant side as well. So I tend to use those as well. So I think it's interesting. I mean, to use this language with yourself, to start to say, wow, these are the routes that I take right now, and start to notice them with our loved ones as a way. So if you're anxious leaning, and your partner or your children or your loved ones or your boss, they tend to go and withdraw, we can actually downregulate with this idea of, as an anxious person, wow, you know what? That's what they're doing. They're actually stepping into safety. So I really feel like this is a genius way to really step into connection, step into understanding, so that some of those wounded areas, if we have an abandonment wound, we're just like, oh, no, okay, let me feel within myself. I'm getting triggered here, but my partner or this loved one, they're stepping into their safety. So using this language is very helpful in relating. And so it's kind of fun to blend this in with what we know about attachment. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I didn't actually mention the action-oriented structure and certainty that I've learned to use over the last 10 years or so, which, interestingly enough, is a combination between inner guidance, sensory experiences, and private retreat. I learned to connect to my sensations by structuring a mindfulness practice. So taking action actually gave me more of a sense of control.
Yes.
And coming from a fearful, avoidant, disorganized background, getting a sense of control is a really big deal. And so taking action always has made me feel better. I just didn't always have the tools to do that effectively. Yes. So retreating into myself initially was not actually very helpful, but it was a little bit less stress than focusing on it. So it was a dissociated response. But just noticing, I actually can engage with people socially now to help resource myself, to feel more calm and safe, because I'm more clear on how to use my language than I used to be. So it's a little bit easier for me to do that and know that I'm more likely to get empathy and understanding, because I can actually word it in a way where I don't push them away by saying something a little bit off the wall like I used to. If I come at somebody, for support, and I'm just bad mouthing somebody else, they might go, what do you think you did? Because if I'm coming at them with a lot of negativity, it's going to come across that I probably provoked that person in some way. So it's less likely I'm going to get the empathy that I want. So it's also something to consider, that as we develop our skills in all of these areas, whether it be mindfulness or social skills, learning to speak with words what you're feeling, that's a skill that people don't always have innately. Based on whatever their attachment style is, it's possible that they're not able to put into words what they're feeling. They might not even be able to feel it. There's a whole process I take a lot of my clients through, helping them learn to feel layers that they're not aware of. And that doesn't always feel safe right away. When you start to melt away layers of unconscious dissociation, I call it melting the iceberg of the unconscious, whatever has been repressed, that can often cause problems that we don't realize are connected to that. For example, you can have aches and pains from too much tension in the body. You don't realize the tension is there because it's an unconscious process. But when you become more aware of it, all of a sudden, you may realize there's pain there you weren't aware of before. That isn't always pleasant. But the reality is you're coming down into awareness so that you don't keep re-injuring yourself. Somebody who's had multiple, let's say shoulder surgeries, rotator cuff, tears, and they don't know how they did it. One client that I've worked with for years who ended up tearing his glute, and he doesn't even know when it happened. That's a big muscle group to tear and not be aware of when it happened. That's a lot of unconscious muscular tension. And so going into deeper layers of awareness will allow dysfunctional patterns to become more available to change. So there's all of these different techniques you can use. I use what I call holistic fitness training to help people use breathing and movement and navigate sensation on a deeper and deeper level by, for example, using breath that mobilizes the system and helps you become more aware through that process of activating the sympathetic nervous system through deep inhales and forceful exhales, right? Or using the nose and breathing calmly, nice and deeply, lengthening your exhale will calm the system. And that'll help you, once you become aware of whatever tension you weren't aware of before, to now calm those muscles and relax them in a way that you weren't capable of before. Sometimes you need to move in order to become aware and feel. So without going into too much detail, you can learn to cultivate completely different neurological patterns, but it takes time and very specific techniques to do that. And Danielle and I both support our clients in various ways to do that.
Yeah. And so we're going to put all this information in the notes so you guys can review this. I think we're coming on to 2 hours, which is amazing. It felt like this just went really quickly. So there's just so much more we could talk about, and I hope that this is really helpful. Again, the modalities, and we'll put, I mean, we work with a lot of these different modalities, and we'll put our information there if you want to reach out for any more guidance or questions or help. Just appreciate everybody just being here to be on the journey with us, and absorbing all of this is intense, but I think a really important part of the process so that we can continue to make progress and those little victories. And I think that you and I both talk about that often. It's these little victories that mean so much. And just that little simple exercise with routes of safety. This is what we can do to increase our own sense of self and add to our toolbox, because befriending the nervous system, down regulating the nervous system, nothing else really happens. There's no progress until we really do that basic work, or in conjunction with anything else that we're doing, like therapy and all of that. So I'm going to leave it there. I know that we're running at time, and I thought you could just end with whatever you thought you wanted to, Mike.
Yes. So I wanted to reiterate that the point of this live was to demystify what's the difference between attachment behaviors, which, as you heard, if you listen to this whole thing, that can apply to trauma, that can apply to past experiences. Our bodies remember things that consciously we're not in tune with. And so what's going on in the nervous system, in the body, underneath that attachment behavior, or any behavior that we have? And what's the most effective way to heal attachment wounding, or any wounding that you have for that matter? And ultimately, that starts with the foundation of creating safety, a more regulated nervous system, connecting to our senses, to the present moment. So those past experiences that show up automatically can be retrained. So if you have any questions, if you're watching it live now, you're welcome to leave a comment, or even if you watch it after the fact. I'll keep an eye out for the comments. I know Danielle will as well.
Yeah, please tag us.
Yes, please do. We will also post this on YouTube. So if you want to check this out elsewhere, you're welcome to do that. And we have a number of online group classes, as well as working with people remotely one-on-one, with a number of different modalities. TRE, which stands for Tension and Trauma Releasing Exercises. Danielle is currently doing the group class for that, and we both work with people individually. We do that through Airmid Wellness and Counseling Center online. So we'll leave links for that. And I also teach Tai Chi online for group classes, as well as one-on-one coaching with movement. So you can work on your healing process through becoming more aware of that body layer of experience. Danielle works with people in a trauma and attachment informed lens with relationships, and helping people to better themselves as individuals as well. We have quite a few things to offer that are based on this foundational knowledge of how the nervous system works, how we regulate our bodies so that our emotions and our minds are more well organized. So they're integrated, differentiated, and linked, our experiences as a human being.
Wonderful. Oh, you said it all. So thank you for joining us on this Saturday or whatever day you're watching this. Just be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, celebrate the small victories, and just step into this in your own special way. No rush, just a lot of safety focus. So thank you for being here.
And Danielle, thank you for joining me on this live.
This was fun. Yeah, me too.
All right,
Thank
everyone,
you.
have a great day. Feel free to reach out if you need anything. Cheers.
Bye-bye.